Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And now it's Alvarez, so they get Altuve going. Can they get the same from their big left-handed slugger? In the air the other way, Schwarber goes back onto the track. He's at the wall, and it's off it. The Astros all over things right away. How about 3 straight doubles and a 2-0 lead?
Double your pleasure at Minute Maid Park, 3 in a row, and the Astros come out banging.
That's right. It is our Halloween episode. Brian Arbor is here. Is it spooky up there in New York, Brian?
It is always spooky in New York. There are Yankee fans everywhere.
I see dead people. There's one, and there's one. Brian, 2 World Series games. I'll start off by saying I had joked in our pre-talk that I was going to have you talk me off a ledge. I'm not on a ledge at all. I had the Astros in 6, in part because I saw them splitting one of the first 2 games. I feel like 2 aces going. We'll get to game 1 and how it turned out differently than I thought. But also, I figured you're not sweeping in Philadelphia. I think you can win 2 of 3. Overall, before we get into it, where are you as far as confidence level and how the series is playing out?
Yeah, I had the Astros in 6 with Framber Valdez as the MVP. So far, yeah, that's still working out, right? That could work for me. From a 30,000 foot standpoint, a split at home is, it's baseball. These are coin flips. That's fine. The Astros are a better team. They have a particular advantage in games 3 and 4 because they have better starting pitching going than the Phillies. So from that standpoint, but of course, being up 5-0 in game 1 and then blowing the lead is really what's, driving us crazy.
Yeah, let's just jump into that too, because obviously a lot of things happened. The most obvious being Verlander being very un-Verlander, but it's going to be a frustrating situation if for some reason the Astros don't win this series, because if any one of 4 things, not all 4 things, any one of 4 things go the Astros' way. You talk about luck a lot and how luck is a part of the game. There was luck on Castellanos' catch. There was luck for the Phillies on Verlander not catching the line drive. Does that change the optics for you a lot, knowing that actually, if anything goes the way it's gone all season, you're actually up 2-0? Or is it time to just kind of put that aside and focus on 3, 4, and 5?
I mean, I think it's time to put that aside. And we should analyze the game and talk about it. But we should, talk about 3, 4, and 5. Verlander's coming up again in game 5, so probably more nervous about that. He's had 2 bad starts out of his last 3, but he's still Justin Verlander. He's still the guy who's going to win the Cy Young Award this year. He's still, a Hall of Fame level pitcher who still seems to be at the top of his game. And the last time he came out with a bad start, he came back and had an excellent start in game 1 of the American League Championship Series. So there's every reason to think that he'll do that again.
Yeah, we'll get to game 5 in a second. I know we're also going to be talking about it as we get to it. But one of the things that I did take the positive out of game 1 is you hit Aaron Nola. You scored 5 runs on him. Talk a little bit about how important it is to really tell the world that even your best isn't quite good enough against this lineup.
Yeah, and then they did the same thing again in game 2 with Zach Wheeler, who there's some perspective that Nola's the best pitcher on the Phillies. There's some perspective that's Wheeler. Regardless, they're their 2 best pitchers. They're their 2 best aces, and the Astros have scored 10 runs off the pair of them. They don't win these games without. They don't win game 2 without that. They're not in game 1 without it. And 2, it should give them. They'll be a little bit more familiar with them later on in the series. In addition to having hit them really well. And frankly, I think the plan they had against Wheeler, being so aggressive and getting pitches in the strike zone to drive in game 1, represents that they had a real good job scouting him. They had a real good job set up by the hitting coaches and by the other front office person, the scouts and the other front office personnel who are analyzing Phillies pitching and how to take advantage of that.
A lot has been made, though, of no runs against the bullpen. How much of that, because the bullpen is not a strength of theirs, how much of that, though, is going to still bear itself out in a 7-game season once we're more familiar with those guys? To your point tonight, is largely going to probably be a bullpen game for them tonight. And quite frankly, potentially tomorrow, with them starting a guy who's already thrown and who's a rookie. So how much of that do you think that advantage still has time to play out in the series?
Yeah. Each time it happens, right? Each time the Phillies bring out someone who's not in their top, essentially 4 arms, hey, the advantage should be with the Astros offense. Will it bear out every at bat and every inning? No, that's what we've seen so far. Will it bear out? Definitely no, because that's baseball. Is it likely to bear out? Yes.
Oh, yeah, I mean, totally. I hate to be the guy that sharpshoots the manager, and we've tried not to do that on this show. And I'm not even going to blame him for not pulling Verlander. I can see the idea of, one, you think Verlander's going to get it back, and you don't want to jump into your bullpen too early in game 1. The Stanek over Garcia decision does loom a little questionable. Now, you've written a bunch about how Stanek hasn't necessarily been our best reliever, that his numbers have been a little misleading, but also that Luis Garcia did have that start against Seattle. Just a little bit about that. What were your thoughts when that happened? And do you feel like going back, he would have actually made a different decision?
Yeah, I mean, so I've said that Ryan Stanek is our 5th best reliever. And well, that was the time for the 5th reliever. They'd used the top 4 relievers already. I mean, there are 2 things you can question about that move. One is, should they have kept Presley in more? And that's a little bit more of, I don't want to wear the guy out in game 1, but obviously game 1's there for the taking at that point. So it's a little bit sort of different sort of calculation. Of course, they had him available for game 2, and he pitched, error notwithstanding, pitched a good inning in game 2. The other thing could you have Stanek or Garcia? What he said is that their sort of matchup sheet, and you saw this as they brought Stanek in to face the lefties by the time they got down to that part of the order. They brought him in to face sort of left-handed hitters, so they saw sort of Garcia's better against righties, which is what his number shows, and his cutter is usually effective against righties. It just wasn't on that one pitch to Realmuto. But I'm going to disagree with you, James, because I think the bigger mistake was leaving Verlander into it.
Okay.
And I think you made the case for it, and it's sort of understandable, but the 3rd time through the order penalty comes for us all.
Sure.
And that's true for Hall of Fame level pitchers, for great pitchers. Usually you kind of blow through it because, them being, 80 to 90% is different, is a pretty high level. But when you have a high quality and deep bullpen, and when you still have, it's the beginning of a series, but still only 7 games most left in your season, and you have a big chance to seize game 1 and make it potentially one less game of the series. Yeah, I think Dusty Baker should have been much more aggressive. I wasn't surprised that he stuck with Verlander, both from the sense of he has trust with Verlander because he's a dude, but also because, he did the same thing in the previous game they played in game 4 of the American League Championship Series, where Lance McCullers looked shaky early, let him go 3rd time through the order, got 5 innings out of him. And he gave up a run, but they got it back. But, was able to dance through the raindrops in that. So I suspect he'll do the same thing tonight. I'm worried that he'll do the same thing tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to your point too, when you're 5 out, you're basically 5 innings away from a win, knowing you need to, again, beat one of these aces.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to beat both of them. Yeah, I guess I see your point that if you figure you've got a bullpen that's 6 or 7 really good arms deep, just throw them all in an inning and we go home with a win. So yeah, good point. And I do think that's the nature of baseball, where we can point to any one of those moments. A good friend of the show, Paul Caputo, he said, if you would have told me we would have won a game with was it Dave Robertson pitching and Castellanos making a defensive play, he never would have believed him. So, again, that's baseball.
It's also the nature of baseball, right? That the defensive advantage stands with the Astros are a much better defensive team. It didn't bear out in game 1. They weren't able to make, and hasn't borne out that much through the series. They haven't been able to make as many plays. And the Phillies, got the great play from Castellanos, which seemed unlikely, but, unlikely things happen all the time in baseball.
They do. I guess before we move out of game 1, just what worried you about the offense coming out of that game, and what are you encouraged by?
I guess the most encouraging thing is that Jose Altuve is looking like Jose Altuve. And I guess the worrisome thing is that, they're not, they haven't gotten anything off the bullpen. And frankly, in game one, they struck out even more than the Phillies, which is not what they'd done throughout the season. So they corrected that a little bit more in game two. But again, one key is, can they make contact? Can they put balls in play? Because that puts pressure on the bad Phillies defense. Maybe they'll make a play like Nick Castellanos did, but the more you force them to do that, the less likely they are to do it.
Man, I thought that ball was going to bounce and we would have just, it would have been a whole different thing. But you roll into game two, and the Astros, I think it's a pretty dominating performance. I think 5-2 with outside of two swings of the bat. Philly never even felt like it was that close, in my opinion. Talk a little bit about, I want to talk about Fromber first, and then we'll talk about Zach Wheeler. But Fromber he's become the stopper, right? Like he's become the guy. Yeah.
And we have watched, this guy go from he's always been nervous and fidgety on the mound, right? But that when he started reflected I don't know how this is going to go, that was in our minds and in his mind. And one of the things that he's improved the quality and development of his pitches, but most importantly, he's developed more mentally. They have mental skills coaches, they have a sports psychologist he's worked with, and that fact seems to be that very little bothers him on the mound now. It gives you this sort of much more mature and professional approach on the mound. And he had really the ideal of a Framber Valdez game. He got 9 outs via strikeout, and I believe 9 outs via ground out,
including a very key double play in there. He almost can get those when he wants them.
Yeah, he got 2 double plays, and those were at the highest leverage moment he faced in the game, which was when they were only up 3-0, and he let the leadoff runner hit single. On the 5th, he got Vierling to ground out, and then he had 2 on and got the Harper grounded a double play. The only time they got 2 runners on him. So they came at the right moments for him. And again, part of that too, keep him off the base, is he had 9 strikeouts that they couldn't make a lot of contact. Even when they did, they hit it right in the ground.
I know a lot of people that are watching right now think, wow, this is a lot of numbers and X's and O's. Don't worry about it. We're getting to drama before we get there. Now, you're a Philly fan. Put your Philly fan hat on, which I think means lowering your vocabulary and upping.
Michael Myers back?
Yeah, you want the Michael Myers mask back? Yeah. One of the things about Zach Wheeler's performance is that he was dropping velo. And he dropped velo, needed an extra day of rest. If you're a Philly fan, are you worried about health when it comes to him in this case?
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to think. He pitched in the World Series with the Mets, but hasn't pitched this deep into a season before. So, I think there's a level of concern there that, hey, we saw this last year, right, where the Astros pitchers, by the time they got to the World Series, really seemed to be, both in the ALCS and the World Series last year, really seemed to be, emptying the tank into the bottom of the reservoir. And that may be the case for Wheeler. He's also a really good pitcher. So, if we could win 3 in Philly and not have to face him again, I wouldn't object.
From your lips to God's ears. Last thing on sort of the X and O's part of this, Altuve. I think the moment where he felt back was him swinging at a ball at his eyes, which first I was like, no. And then, of course, in Altuve fashion, he hit that ball, got a base hit out of it. What I love about this guy is you really can never tell whether he's hitting or not. He's such a team player with a positive attitude. And I think that's what they mean when they say as Altuve goes, the Astros go. I don't even think it necessarily means approach. I think it means state of mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, look, if your leadoff hitter gets on base a whole bunch and hits with power like Altuve does, your offense is going to be good. So he's a key in his performance. But the thing about Altuve, right, is he always seems to be the ideal of what we teach like 12-year-olds how to think about baseball, which is do right for your team. Don't think about yourself. Think about about making the right play. Be not a selfish player, and think about what's best for the team. He's never anyone who makes drama. He's never anyone who makes it about himself, except, of course, when he hits the ball really hard and makes nice plays in the field. He does more often, does a lot.
All right, Brian. So I had a tweet last night, and I've been trying to stay off Twitter. I've actually deleted it from my phone, so I have to go through the browser. But I said I kind of miss playing Atlanta fan and Yankee fan when it comes to high stakes games, and I think in part because maybe they know baseball better. I don't know what it is, but to have both Philly fan and Philly media running with two conspiracy theories that even the national media is saying, whoa. Let's first talk about the bat. The bat that Maldonado borrowed from Albert Pujols. First of all, if we could borrow some of his production too, I would take it. But yeah, the bat that
his speed.
Yeah, just anything. But yeah, they played together. They're apparently close friends. Maldonado made seems to be a very clerical mistake as far as getting a bat that if he had started before 2010, he could use, but he started before at 2011. But yet, no matter what's happening, including Philly actual reputable media is running with the whole idea that the Astros are cheating again. Between that, and we're going to get to the Fromber thing in a minute, but is this just what we're going to be dealing with? Like now is every team going to create either an excuse or a hero story for whether they win or lose?
I mean, everything I've read in the national media has been, even though I'm going to spend 95% of this article talking about the, actual series, I have to intro with something about the sign stealing scandal. So short answer is, yeah, I think that's still something they'll continue to talk about. Frankly, they'll continue to talk about until the Astros get bad. So it won't go away until there's a sense of they've lost. So it's a good thing they're still talking about it because it means it hasn't, the team hasn't declined. On the specific issue with Maldonado, the issue with the bats, Major League Baseball banned the maple bats that Pujols is using because they're a slight safety hazard due to creating splinters. They're no better or worse than any other bat. It's not a problem with, them being corked or anything. It's just, yeah, this is a safety issue. From now on, you can't use this. And by the time you get to 20, 11 years later, like no one uses this except for the one guy who stuck around forever. It doesn't surprise me Maldonado didn't know that because it's probably not anything he's ever heard of as someone who came up shortly after that and not something talked about in the game today. So yeah, it's not a deal. It doesn't mean anything. There's probably some, probably this has happened before. And, same thing happened. They used it once. They made a mention of it. They said, oh, I apologize. Won't do that again. And we'll move on.
The other thing that was Fromber doctoring the ball and lots of things about now beyond the fact that there is 6 innings worth of video of him being checked by the umpire. I mean, this isn't a thing that happens anymore, but I know a lot has been made about the fact that he does change his cleats a lot and he does change his glove. And a lot of that is because he sweats. And a lot of that is because it's a nervous tick that he's using through his psychologist to help keep him in games. Just talk a little bit about that. I mean, in just how, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that's still a thing that's going to run and dominate part of the news cycle, particularly if the Astros end up winning.
Imagine you're the Mariners and you've played this guy 4 or 5 times this season and once in the playoffs, and you realize, oh, I should have noticed this in April. Well, yeah. It probably wasn't a thing. Oh, and the Mariners kind of really wanted to win 1 extra game this year because they were out of the playoffs by 1 game last year. So again, I think it's a thing by someone having, paid particular attention to it, but someone who hasn't looked at Fromber throughout the season. Best sort of video I saw, a discussion of this is the pitching Ninja account put out a video of a ton of Fromber's moves from the first start of the season against the Angels, where, well, he was doing the exact same stuff because, well, as you know, as I know, he always does that stuff. I always love with Fromber. He's now, I think this is a sign of his maturity. When he first came up, as soon as he got the 3rd out of the inning, the first thing you do is take his hat off. For some reason, Fromber just hated wearing his baseball cap. And, he's just a fidgety guy. I'm a fidgety guy, so respect to Fromber.
Yeah, respect to Fromber. The other thing too is, they just had Steve Sparks on the radio before you and I jumped on, and he just talked about, look, when you sweat, you change if you're not changing your jersey, you're changing your undershirt. He used to do it between every inning, and I just think again, like it's to point at the sort of larger problem we have in our culture. I know, but people, you see it in my industry all the time, in the film industry, people create a victim story to explain why they're not famous. And it almost seems like Philly fan is propping themselves up for explaining why they lost a World Series, when frankly, if they lose, it's because they were simply outmanned, and doesn't take away from what an amazing season they've had.
Perhaps they should have offered Framber Valdez $11,000 back in the day, and they wouldn't be in this situation.
They wouldn't be in this situation. All right, let's talk about it. We've got, again, 5 games left. It's a best of 5 series. Where, first of all, you had you had the Astros in 6. You still very comfortable with that pick?
Yes.
Okay, I am as well. And in many ways, it's playing out kind of how I expected. I will be honest too. I'm actually more confident going into Game 3 than maybe I was Game 1, because you and I grown up knowing that this is an Astros organization that can disappear in the playoffs pretty easily.
Yeah, and it's baseball, so you just feel nervous and anxious no matter what, and true. The Phillies have moved up Noah Syndergaard to pitch in Game 3. The Astros have faced this year when he was with the Angels. Syndergaard has sort of diminished from his Thor days, partly because he doesn't strike as many people out, so he does not look like a god of thunder and lightning anymore. He looks kind of like a really long-haired Jake Odorizzi. A guy with a lot of sinker, who's got a sinker that's faster than Jake Odorizzi, but gets some ground balls, but is pretty hittable. He is a very average pitcher. This is not a time for average pitching, so I don't expect him to be on the mound long tonight. But the Phillies really trust 2 guys in their bullpen. You notice in Game 1 they brought out Ranger Suarez to face the left-handed pocket.
Yep,
he's starting Game 4, so I assume he's not going to pitch tonight. So we'll get more of the underbelly of the Phillies bullpen. So the advantage shifts to the Astros. But as you mentioned before, they haven't gotten anything off the Philly bullpen. They haven't gotten anything off the non-ace pitchers. So, that obviously needs to change.
Yeah, and I think it's also really key to, I don't imagine Syndergaard's going to go more than 3 anyway. That's been about what he's seen since he's gone to, I guess it's about September in Philadelphia. But really big advantage, they can get to him early, and they can. I don't think Philadelphia can afford to go down 2-1 in the 3rd game of this series.
Yeah, I mean, they can in the sense that there's no must wins until you're down 3 games.
Right,
but,
right.
They have, I think they anticipate that they need to win the Nola and Wheeler games in 5 and 6, and they've got to find one other win between the other 2. So one is the Astros could just win all the other games, 3, 4, and 7. And they need to avoid not losing, and they need to, or win one of the 2 like they did in Game 2. But the advantage certainly exists with the Astros tonight.
One of the things that also could help the Astros tonight is the rain. We have rain coming in. I think they said around 9:30 it should start to get pretty soggy. I don't think you'll see the game postponed, but you could see a stoppage. With the Astros having 2 starters sitting in the bullpen, is this an even more advantage to the Astros pitching staff if there is a stoppage of play for, say, an hour and then you start again?
Yeah, if you end up, it's a little less of an advantage. I slightly disagree here. They could do that. They could bring out Luis Garcia or Jose Urquidy in like the 3rd if they needed to, if there was a rain delay and they didn't want to bring Lance out. We'll see sort of how they handle it, but the Phillies aren't planning to go along with Syndergaard no matter what. So the best case scenario for the Astros is they're able to get to Syndergaard early, and they're able to get him up, get a second time up in the Jordan Bregman Tucker pocket lineup.
I guess the best case scenario is they just score 10 and you and I flip over to Frazier reruns or something while the game is on.
Why not 20?
Well, I'm trying not to be greedy. It is Halloween. I guess it's time to be greedy. All right, Brian, we will be back tomorrow on Go Astros to break down Game 3, which I have a really good feeling about this team, Brian. I feel, I think obviously 19, we really weren't doing the show then, but I think we can all admit that we felt good about it, but then it didn't go the way we wanted. I think we can, if we're honest, maybe last year we didn't feel super good about it when we got into the World Series because of the injuries, but I feel really good about this.
Yeah, we're a healthy team and we're a better team. Does that play out over 7 games? Not always. If it always played out over 7 games, we wouldn't be watching the Phillies in this World Series. But you know, advantages exist with the Astros, and I think game 1 felt terrible, right? Both watching the last few innings of it, and just in the sense that you let one get away, and that feeling lasted until the first at bat, because I don't think the Astros, I don't think Jose Altuve, I don't think Kyle Tucker or pick your random Astro woke up on Saturday morning. It's like, oh, I can't believe we lost that game last night. It is, hey, we got a game today. We're going to go out and do this, and I'm going to, go through the stuff I always do, and they played like that.
That actually brings me to something, because the number of both analysts, both amateur and professional, that talked about, well, the Astros just seemed really casual after game 1, like it was not a big deal, and they're not showing any urgency. And I'm thinking to myself, it's baseball. Like, that's the way to be. The way to be is, as soon as the last out's recorded, that game is over. Relax, start focusing on game 2. It really is, just shows you how much people don't truly understand baseball.
Yeah, and part of the difficulty with studying the psychology of teams from the outside is we have really lousy data, but we have explanations that can work both ways.
Right.
They were too tight or they were too loose, right? Are they? I don't know. And we're trying to read through lots of real subtle signs that very few of us are trained to do. And, again, the reason, again, we talked about Fromber having success with the sports psychologist. What did the sports psychologist do? I don't know. I can just sort of see the results of that there, but it's an individual process of understanding, taking, large data about sort of how human psychology works, but then applying it to individuals who are difficult and contradictory and don't always fit neatly into the large scale models, but that's why you work on an individual basis with them.
Yeah, a lot of people wanting to see the Astros try hard in the sport where oftentimes trying isn't what works, but we will try. We're not going to try. We're do or do not. There is no try. We'll be back tomorrow, Brian. Thanks for jumping on, and go Stros.
Go Stros.
All right, and we would like to say, Andy, get better soon. We'll have you back on as soon as you're feeling better.